So, hello guys. I hope you're all well and having a great week. So, on this winter evening, Middlesex University Product Design Engineering, and Design Engineering are really excited to host the 10th talk in the annual guest lecture series. So, this series runs weekly throughout the academic year on Thursday evenings, bringing together a vibrant mix of speakers from across the full spectrum of design and engineering. So, we have a mix of leading practitioners, opinion leaders, radical thinkers, and emerging talents to inspire and support your professional development. Tonight, we're delighted to host Nik Ramage. A warm welcome from the entire MDX family, where Nik is a familiar face. He's run in previously great mechanical workshops and mechanical projects as well, with some fantastic outputs such as Ruby Goldberg machines and video outputs of mechanical interventions. Who is Nik? Nik's a sculptor of useless machines and absurd devices. I'm sure he'll show and go through many of his outputs and some of his machines this evening. So in terms of what Nik does, he designs machines that have drifted away from the utility or function or objects that have a purpose. So they kind of forget their purpose. They're made from found objects, a lot of kind of steel and machine parts infused along with the human aspect and the human condition as well. Nik, he initially trained as a graphic designer, where he learned how to kind of visually communicate and shape ideas. And he transitioned into making art that doesn't have a hard utility or function, but still uses a lot of the problem solving and fabrication skills therein as well. Some fantastic work. And as usual, guys, feel free to gather your thoughts, your questions, and your comments in the chat throughout the talk. We're going to have Q&A at the end as well. And also, there's an option to go live and interact with Nik after the main talk, should you wish to do that. And over to Nik with the talk titled Adventures in the Absurd.
Thanks very much, Ahmed. That's a very nice introduction. I'm Nik, and as Ahmed said, I'm a mechanical sculptor. So we'll perhaps find out what that means as we go through. So my descriptor that I use is that I make useless machines and absurd devices. So as we've already hinted, it's this sort of no strict utility, but we'll come back to that, I think. So where should we start? We should start, like a lot of conversations here. Okay. So that's a well, it's unsurprisingly called "How Are You?" This gallery here is in Bristol. And here we are. It's a case in point of found materials. So a lot of these letters would have been from like shop signage, and yeah, there's a couple of bike wheels in there. And in the structure is found bits of steel. You know, it's got paint on it from its previous purposes, and this snow shovel, which I thought seemed appropriate for like way clearing. I made this snow shovel there. I made this in September of 2020, just sort of as we were poking our nose out of lockdown, and it was coming back again. And how are you? It was like quite a loaded question at the time, because no one was feeling that terrific. And yeah, it was sort of like sticking our nose back into the social world. And as I say, how are you? Which seemed like quite a loaded term at the time. So. So that one, that's called the unplugger for obvious reasons. And that's pretty much the definition of a useless machine. Its purpose is to defeat itself. It's got its, a tiny narrative, beginning, middle, and end, like a little lifespan. It was a bit like a prototype electric vehicle. This, it's that's its point is to go nowhere and defeat itself. So this piece, which is called Jelly Wobbler, is next year will be 30 years old. So this is like one of the first things I made. So on the top there is it's a real jelly, but it's extra strong so that it can hold that form. So I made a sort of a fiberglass mold for it in a sort of classic cartoon jelly shape, and it's got a sewing machine motor on, and out of shot is a foot pedal accelerator, just like you get on a sewing machine. So the viewer can operate it and drive it and decide how it should move. So I've got a quite awful low quality film here, but there we are. So opinion is divided as to whether I should have wobbled it right off the plate there, or that was just save it in the nick of time. So as I say, that one's quite old, and this is a newer one from last year. So that was based on that phrase or that question about what is the sound of one hand clapping. So I'd heard that phrase and sort of, I guess, pondered it, and this is an answer to that question. So we're listening kind of in theory to the hand of one hand plus its own reflection. So I found out later, as I looked into it a little bit more, that the question about the sound of one hand clapping is a koan or cone, which is it's like a riddle with no answer. So it just and they're used in Zen Buddhism to confound logic, so that you basically give up on logic because it just can't. There are some things it can't solve, and if you do that enough, enlightenment lies ahead. So yes. So another recent one. So that one is called Sign of Life. And again, there's I'd heard about this idea of using it back in the olden days of holding up a mirror to someone's face if they're passed out, and if they're dead, you hold up a mirror to their in front of their face just to see, just to check and see if there's any condensation appears on the mirror. So plus, you know, we all know that the effect of breathing on a window on a cold morning like we're having at the moment. So it's kind of produced this quite small, quite a slight element that's, I guess, quite loaded. It's, you know, like a rhythmic condensation that becomes sign of someone being alive. So the whole thing is like a sort of homemade science experiment. So it's got, you know, it's got domestic things, it's got the teapot, and yeah, it's, as I say, it's sort of soft. Yeah, it's sort of like a sort of experiment you might, you know, a shed kind of experiment. So you might have gathered there's some hot water in the teapot, and this tea light keeping it warm, and then we've got the bellows, and this is motor off a car window, which gives us the rhythmic the pumping up and down on the bellows, which is enough to put the air through the teapot and then out onto the mirror, which is a sufficient temperature difference to give us the condensation. Okay. So so this one's, you know, sort of quite a simple one. But again, you know, taking an idea as a start point, and this is, it's that thing we do. Humans sort of tend to divide ourselves up. So here we are, us and them, and so we divide ourselves up into tribes along all sorts of lines. And, you know, you might say, well, that's good. Yeah, it gives us a sense of identity and belonging. But there's the sort of other side of it where you're doing, you know, you're setting up that group in opposition to someone, you know, another group. So, I mean, I don't think I've especially passed comment on this. I've just sort of found an analogy for it. So the hand mirror, you see your own face in that, but then it passes round, and you get to see them in the black, the other side of it. So, and sort of technically, you perhaps recognise this as a hand drill. So it's a sort of, you know, you'd lean down here, put the drill chuck should be here, and the drill bit here, and the handle should be here, so turn that round and drill bit whizzes round. So I've used it in reverse. I put it looks like a fishing reel handle in there, and we're slowing it right down, so 3 or 4 turns here and we get one up here. So I mean, you might recognize that from the Sign of Life. It's quite a neat little system that it changes the angle. So yeah, I've used it a few times. So this one is called punctuation orrery. So let me, an orrery, some of you might be aware of, and some of you might not. So it's one of these. So it's a clockwork model of the solar system. So in the middle here, we've got the brass sun, and then we come Mercury, Venus, Earth with its moon there. So it's, yeah, clockwork in here, and these things move in as they should, as it's the mechanical solar system. I think this one is actually missing a planet, but that's the 18th century for you. So let's go back. So my one, I've no planets, but punctuation instead. And we've got the full stop dark star in the middle, and brackets, question mark, etc. going on around it. So just have a quick look at that. Okay. So all the ones I've shown you so far have been moving ones, but I also do ones that don't strictly move, but there's a kind of movement inherent in them. So so here's a chair with literally a line cut out of the middle. So in other circumstances, I might get you to shout out how this works. But if you're so have a moment now to guess how it works. So yeah, there's no Photoshop. This is actually as is. And I put some repelling magnets in the rim here. And yeah, I did experiment on trying to do it without the walking stick, but you've got to have one side that's slightly stable, and then the other side, this side can rest against that. So there was I did a little set of these chairs where I've a chair is to provide repose in a sitting position, and stability is pretty important to that. So I've messed with that, and I've effectively taken that stability away. So so the one on the left, all the uprights are now springs. Actually, ironically, the back is still quite strong because it's curved, but these legs are not strong. And in this one, I've inserted bars of soap in each leg, so it evokes like slippiness. So here's this is like, how could you make a sphere better? It's kind of perfect form, but we can't help tinkering with things. So here's Sphere 2.0 with casters all over it. And it's become a paradox because the casters barely work on it. You don't need them anyway because the ball rolls perfectly well by itself. But yes, so it's like an improved object that is not in the process. So this is a solid piece of oak, and it's about 70 centimeters across. So it's pretty heavy. And I got a log from a local chain sawmill, and I said that would give about 80 centimeters in all directions, and then started carving it with a chainsaw, and then with a grinder, like an angle grinder with a blade that can grind wood, basically. So yeah, so that's the process that went on for that to make that one. So, but again, this belongs to a little series. So the cubic one was the first one, and that's sort of 21 centimeters. And I think, as I remember it, the initial idea was like trying to make a cube ball, like you could sort of throw it along the ground like a bowling ball, and it would, tumble and then magically start sliding on one surface. Of course, it doesn't work like that, but it's this sort of it's sort of like a super utilitarian object. Someone said it was like sort of some sort of IKEA nightmare where you just like on the self-assembly. And then this one, it's about 33 centimeters, this one, and hooks. Hooks work in one direction. They're sort of they use gravity, but we've got this full surface of them. So I quite like to do one more so that they can sort of well, you can have two locking together like Velcro. And I think the last one, maybe, I want to do another sphere, but with plug holes in, because again, plug holes just have, they have a definite downward direction. So it would be all over plug holes. So a ladder, more messing with function is like, it's almost like you can see the thought process. Oh yeah, wouldn't it be good if ladders could be a bit small so we could transport them more easily? And then so I'll pop hinges in, and I've achieved that, but it's become lethal in the process. So the proper design solution now you get is telescopic ladders with proper locking, and great, they do the job. So it's the same sort of that's a proper solution to the same thing. So yeah, we've talked a little bit, and Ahmed mentioned it at the start, that designers are making tools for a better world. You kind of your function, it's all about function, whereas art, there's no strict utility. It's it's a bit more nebulous, and it's asking questions, processing the world for the artist, and then addressing people's inner life and imagination. And design can like use these tricks as well, but I'd say utility is the big, not divide, but a bit, art doesn't need to address utility in the same way. So here's the ladder climbing some stairs at a gallery in Hong Kong. So it makes perfect sense that it's always showed on stairs, because they're doing the same thing. And there it is, sort of semi unwrapped on the floor. So this one is a broom. So it looks like a broom, but on closer inspection, it's useless. It's like a puppet of a broom. So it, under tension, it looks the part, but this is going to fall apart. So yes, so utility has been struck off once again. So so I included this one here because this felt appropriate on the theme of utility. So this, we'll see in a moment, is a record player, and records are brilliant. I think that is a good trick to be able to put basically any noise into a wobbly groove on a piece of vinyl. So I've tried to remake a gramophone, but homemade technology only. So here's the drill again. So instead of the motor, we've got a sound horn that's kind of slightly professional from, and well, let's just have a look and we can spot the other bits and pieces in it. Okay, so I mean, as you can see, the sound quality is, well, it's awful. Yeah, this is, Butcher's Records basically. But I think by not using the proper kit, we get to still work out how clever it is. So we've got it's like a sewing needle, and then there's a little diaphragm which is off a jar of sweets, and then the sound goes up some plumbing pipes here. There's a bit of a joint here, then it goes up. This was actually homemade, but not by me, by whoever owns a gramophone, and I don't know, obviously their sound horn had some dreadful accident and they remade it. So that's sort of what set me off on this one. Yeah, so So it's like I've given myself a challenge, and I'll probably set myself up to fail, but quite a good result on the way, I think. So here's a pair of shoes with a difference. So it's 4 pairs of shoes, and they all belong to my daughters. So I was accumulating their shoes once I had this idea when they were little. And so it's called Growth, and it's sort of quite a literal showing of that process: small feet, bigger feet, bigger feet, bigger feet. So I guess this one took me about 14 years and an hour to make. So I do like shoes as a sort of stand-in for people. So so this is here and now shoes, and you can imagine. So you can see the 2 words here. So if you imagine wearing these and walking along a sandy beach, your left foot is going to be marking points in space, here. And then your right foot is going to be marking points in time, now. So it's like a spatial and time journey just from a set of footprints. So you see, it looks like it's in a church or something. This was quite a large show I had at a medieval castle, effectively, in Derbyshire called Haddon Hall. So it pops up. If it's an old looking castle-y type of place, then that's probably where it is. So I thought I'd show you some drawings. Just, I love seeing people's process a little bit more, and seeing how it all happens. So this was from a show from last year. I decided to do this, so I photocopied a load of drawings out of my little ideas books. I have small books that are sort of A6-ish, and I am constantly drawing down ideas. Some of them are good, some of them aren't, but out they come, and get them down, whichever, and we work out later whether they're going to be made or they're worthwhile. So that's a chair being sort of pulled up a counterweight and some restraining wires. So it's like a hovering chair, and so you can imagine it sagging if you did sit on it. So so this is a collar and tie on a plinth that's kind of head at the correct height. So it's the tool you need to be a white collar worker. Walking fingers. Okay, so that's the one an earlier drawing for the one hand clapping piece that we saw earlier. And in this version, it looks like I was thinking of using one of those artists' hands, like a mannequin hand. And yeah, in these drawings, this here, hovering components is fine because it's about the idea, and later I'll work out the nuts and bolts of it. Note to self. Making fire, so we've got reciprocal motion, this twig or branch going back and forth, rubbing against this other branch in the hope of making fire. This is like a dripping machine, trying to make a musical rhythm out of drips. I dare say that there's a proper solution to that about sampling drips and sequencing them beautifully, but wouldn't it be great if you could do it for real in analog, old school way? So that was the idea. Bread and butter rubbing up against one another. Thoughts. Hopefully you can read that. So this one was like a pair of chairs. You pedal here, and you've got a wheel sideways, operating sideways there, and then a track connecting the two of them. So you and a partner could pedal around on it, but you couldn't be in the same room at the same time. So it's like sort of confounding your being in the same room, communicating with one another. And this was a sort of elaborate seesaw system for lifting someone up through a hole in the floor above. And it's about whispering a secret into this and then hearing a secret and then coming back down again. Okay, so there's an early drawing of How Are You, more hovering components. As I say, some of these will get made. We've seen two or three that have been made, and the ratio of ones that I make compared to the drawings is quite small, because it's easier to have ideas, and you need to filter them as well, because not every idea is great or worth doing, and I think a little bit of time always helps. The best idea you ever had was 5 minutes ago, and you come back to it tomorrow and you'll have a bit more perspective on it and work out if it was such a good idea or not. So these are like working drawings. So it's a bigger notebook, and this is where I'm starting to think things through and engage with the practical problems of what size girder we're going to need, where, how to support all these letters, and I was quite on that one. I was quite keen that they all kind of quite animated. They all wobbled around. So I don't want to intervene too much. And I definitely don't want a big square of steel with them all bolted on. That's just too much. It's just too heavy. So because these are lovely objects, and I want them to thrive rather than kill them off with a great big formal structure. So here's some drawings from the one hand clapping piece, working on various pivots and things, and sort of starting to work out on the structure of these things. More frames, bit of a to-do list, bit of a shopping list down there. The sign of life one, there's my idea drawing, and then here's all my, I'm trying to work out the valves and things. I'm working out the shape for another one that we haven't seen actually. So on the left, we've got a sort of wiring diagram, how to fit all these wires into the frame for something. And that was an initial drawing for that, for the hand that I carved for the one hand piece. So I imagine that maybe one or two of you are thinking, this is all very well, but where's the commercial viability of all this? Well, one of the answers is editions. So this, so it's a piece it's still an artwork, but it's reproduced. So you work out a way of mass producing it or semi-mass producing it, and it becomes cheaper and more affordable. So let's have a look at this one. So you perhaps gathered it's life size, and these are a cast of my fingers, and they've got all the realistic stroke creepy detail of fingers on them. This was an original piece, and I worked with this company, Lake England, a couple of guys up north in Huddersfield, to refine it. So this is the first version on a record sleeve. So the original one made in 2003, and then I worked with Lake England in 2009. As I say, to make it easier to produce, we took all the welding out because that's too complicated, too costly, and as it stands, I still do the casting for the fingers, and then I send them up to Martin up in Huddersfield, and he assembles them and ships them all over the place and deals with all the orders and things. There's the back of the record sleeve. And we've done several versions. There were sort of 3 main improved versions, making slight changes, and the colours changed as well. And then we did we've done special editions mostly for Paul Smith, the fashion impresario, and sort of using colour variation. So these are they're cast from polyester resin with metal fillers. So this is copper, bronze, iron, aluminium, and brass. So last year we passed the 500 mark. There's 500 of these things out in the world, and I made a little film, a sort of making of film, and I thought I'd show you the title sequence for that. So this is another one that has become an addition. So quite an old piece. I made it in 1996. I showed it a bit at the time, and then I think I slightly kind of put it away, maybe thinking it was a bit too obvious, something. And anyway, I posted it on Instagram a few times, about Brexit or whatever, getting on my wick at the time. And then in March 2020, when we were, it was, lockdown was happening for everyone, there was basically a global spike in frustration, and it had its moment. So there was a Twitter thread that had 33 million views featuring this, and it wasn't credited, which was a shame. But it was out of the can. It was flying all over the shop. And I, to be honest, I've no idea how much. That was just one thread. I've no idea how many times it got viewed. So the original is owned by a gallery in Madrid, and I think probably on the sort of all that interest in 2020, they proposed making an edition. So just have a quick look at check out the motor there, and then okay, sorry, it's good to play this. Sorry, I was meant to show you that a bit sooner. And this is the edition version. So a wee bit different here. But they scanned my original carving and then machine carved. So they're made of real wood, but they're machine carved, including all my little imperfections right here. If I'd known they were going to be reproduced, maybe I'd have worked things out a bit better. And yeah, they did a great job. They imported 120 of these London bricks to Spain where they were being made. So hats off to them. So here they all are. I did ask Javier, who made them, if he could just switch them all on. I thought that'd be really great. And funnily enough, he had something better to do. So they did a lovely box, which with my drawing on the side, and the lid slides off. And this is their nice marketing film. Pretty nice. Great to see what a professional filmmaker can do. So talking of which, this is at a studio in LA about two weeks ago, and there's Brick in front of the camera being shot for the title sequence of a feature film. And the writer director got in touch and felt it, it was apposite film, symbol for what happens in the film, which is called foibles, which I already liked. So it's on, it's on green screen. He'll drop some other background in, and this here, that's the lens. So it gets up really close, and I've seen some footage. It looks great. It looks massive, basically. So and then he's going to matte in a different background. So that all sounds quite exciting. So this is another film thing. So, moving sculptures that kind of lends themselves towards the moving image, towards film. And so this is a commission, and at the top in the intro, Ahmed mentioned a Rube Goldberg machine. So this, so I've done one before, and this was another one in 2019. So the idea, if you're not up with it, is a Rube Goldberg machine is like a chain reaction machine where you've got one action passes its energy onto the next, one thing leads to another, and the ideal is to film it in one take, so you've really proved that this thing happened for real. You haven't done loads of post-production or jiggery pokery on it. So there's a whole ton of them on YouTube, but the original, I believe, was from 1987 by two Swiss artists called Fishley and Rise, and their film's called, or translates as the way things go. So on this here, we can see there's a balloon deflating on a roller skate. There's a kettle here, again on a roller skate. Oh, some fantastic walking shoes here. But if you're interested in this sort of thing, I would recommend looking that up. So that's why I popped it on the screen if you want to grab a screenshot or whatever. They're the original. So I've done one before, and this was for a company called Segro, who basically own and rent out massive warehouses. And it was coming up to their centenary there, so they've been trading for 100 years. And they've got a load of interesting businesses, interesting things happening in them, and they wanted a way to show how all these disparate businesses, and the director came up with the idea of the Rube Goldberg machine, so all the parts in the film are pertinent to them. So this is it.
Hello, I'm Sir Noel Mobbs. In 1920, we established the business that is now Segro. It has been fascinating to see how one thing has led to another.
You can see this is a huge space. It's 65,000 square feet, which is basically massive. And it was one of their spaces, and it was between two tenants. So we had about 2.5 weeks to do this, and then get out, leave it empty as we found it. So there was no power in there, no lights. So that is us getting some power into the space. No furniture. I think we bought a couple of desks from IKEA, and they lasted about half an hour before they got sucked up into the machine. So yeah, we were planning this for about 7 months, which was actually really nice to work on it quite steadily for all that time. So I wrote a script first, so it was easier to do it in words, because words are just faster to change than drawings, and then worked up into drawings. And then we had a sort of 2-week cycle where go back to, I'd do my bit, then the clients would come back with response, and they'd say, oh, we don't think we're a grand piano company or whatever. They've got opinions about what is suitable and what isn't. And it was actually quite hard to start, in that they wouldn't tell us who the clients were, who the people in the warehouses were. This was sort of market sensitive information. They're a FTSE 100 company, so they don't want to be giving away information in case, who knows. But they said, just assume we can get anything. So I said, can we have a helicopter? And they said, no, do you know what the budget is? And I didn't at that stage, but it was worth a try. We did go and have a site visit. They got a site in Park Royal, and that was really useful to actually just look around and see the guys doing the football machine were there. So that got my brain going. So it was enough to sort of get us going. So in these drawings, you perhaps recognise some of it. There's some changes came along. This airline seat arrived about 2 days before the shoot, and it needs 400 volts to operate. So yeah, I ended up, there was a little footstool on the back, so I ended up using that. Here, this is where the Royal Mail trolley is in the film. I had a supermarket and a hospital trolley. I had a grand idea about trying to transfer a layer cake from one trolley to the next, which would have been just messy. So that's the last section. At one point we were going to have a robot paint the circle, but the pace would have just been all wrong, in that the pacing is really important, and you're quite a big build up, and then have to wait 5 minutes for the robot to do its thing. That was just not going to work. This is a big cement pipe being lowered into place, because once that was in place, we definitely couldn't move it. This was a section with balloons lifting up the 100 figure. I think the director was of the opinion that if you attach enough helium balloons to anything, you can lift it up, and I wasn't quite so sure. And anyway, it was just too much work. There was loads of seepage. It would work. We got it to work, and then it would not work half an hour later because too much helium's escaped. So it had to be ditched, really. So this one, the trolley, the Royal Mail trolley bashes in here. It pulls these flushes on these two cisterns. So Screwfix was clients, which is brilliant. Loads of useful stuff from them. Pours water down into these tanks. Got some lush bath bombs doing their thing there. And then the chair and the box come together. The chair gets boxed up, which it seems to be a lot of them. A lot of businesses doing that. Are we okay? All right for time, Ahmed? I'm speeding it up.
Yeah, it's perfect, Nick. Perfect.
Okay. So this, so the string from the previous one with the chair and the box pulls on this key fob, and that operates the boot button for this posh Jaguar car. and then that pushes something up. So these were some switches. This is we dropped some umbrellas on a sheet, and that was to activate this control board for those 2 spotlights that sweep down. So, you know, this is quite an expensive bit of kit. You don't really want to be messing with it too much. So the string can come off, so that, you know, there's like, you can't yank it too hard. This was there was a fruit and veg wholesaler, so we made a battery out of lemons that operated the stylus on it. So this app operates the football machine. You can just see there. Yeah, so yeah, lots of convoluted nonsense. Well, that was the Compton bikes collapsing onto one another. This is the camera that we used for that one. So it was filmed in one take. We were very close to giving up, but you know, it did work. Okay, so yeah, it was a great project, you know, quite intense, and we can always, these things, they eat as much manpower as possible, so we could have, you know, a few more people wouldn't have gone amiss, but it did all work. So to finish up, there's 3 of my shoe machines. As I said, I do like a shoe. And lastly, okay, so mark my words, that's the future. That's the future of travel right there. So okay, so there we are. So Ahmed, I think you might have, do you have some questions and things?
Amazing. What's that? The Tesla shoe wheel, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Nik, that was absolutely fascinating in terms of the overview, snapshot of your work, and obviously the selected useless machines and systems that you have there. Fantastic case studies and work. Guys, feel free to continue to gather your thoughts and questions in the chat. If you want to go live and interact and talk to Nik as well, feel free to do that. The first question coming in from Irene is that, Nik, you're showing us your final products and final machines. And she was wondering how you get to the idea. So do you have the idea and find the materials to make it, or do you like tinker and try until you get with something that you're happy with?
It is generally, it is starting with the idea, and you can see I outlined in the first few, you know, these little ideas about, say, the one hand clapping or the mirror with the condensation on it. This is a little idea that's that catches my imagination. I'm thinking, what can I do with that? But I do, in my workshop, I've got a load of materials that is my kind of thing. So I've got a kind of vocabulary of useful things. So it may be that I have quite a lot of the material, but not all of it. So then there'll be some other things that I need to hunt down. But as you see, you know, I'm not using new materials. It's not just, you know, get on straight on RS components and get this stuff. It's all stuff that's got a history. It's found materials, so that's quite important that it looks old. It's got a history. It's got some patina to it. But you know, I do. It is really nice to be playing with actual materials, but mostly I'm doing that in service of the idea that I had plucked out of the air.
Amazing, amazing. A similar question as well, following on from that, Nick, is in terms of the narrative of your work. So the question is that the narratives in your work is really strong, like, for example, Them and Us, Sign of Life, Unplug. So what's your design or ideation process like, and how do you come up with these titles? So are these titles a starting point that drives your ideation, or do you explore lots of possibilities and mechanisms and then come up with the title at the end to summarize them?
I mean, I guess there is a sort of action that I'm after, and it could be achieved in several ways. And that action, again, is doing something else. So, you know, it is about, you know, how do you make condensation appear? So I've like set myself a challenge, and then you sort of work back from that. The titles, on the whole, they're extremely boring. They're you know, they're quite matter of fact. You know, it's Unplugger. I mean, some of them have a teeny bit of poetry to them, but mostly I'm letting the object do the work and tell its story. And I mean, that's interesting. You know, you've picked up on the narrative because, well, I mean, I guess, you know, showing you films like this, you get that sense of them being each a little story. So I hope that covered it.
That's amazing. Yep. And another question coming in from Orvi. Do you consider yourself part of any artistic movement like Surrealism or Dadaism, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, both those, you know, I'm like more or less 100 years too late, but I mean, they're totally, they're both of those you know, would inspire and inform what I do. I mean, in the 60s, there was like people who were like neo-Dada, so I could be just about post neo-Dada, I don't know. But I mean, I suppose in a formal way, you could, kinetic is quite a big term that I do get lumped in with, which just means moving. Initially, that bothered me a little bit because to me, kinetic art, again, but was quite a 60s thing and had quite a clean look to it. And I'm not interested in that. You know, it's much more involved or messy than that. So the forefather on that is a Swiss sculptor called Jean Tinguely, and he was a bit of an outlier in the whole kinetic thing, in that he was a lot more fun, and it was kind of full of crazy kinetic energy and quite anarchic. So he'd have qualified on the neo-Dada front. But nowadays, everything's so sort of, you know, poly-everythingous that it's hard to know. I mean, kinetic is the one that I am going to get put in. But as I say, I mean, I'm keen on the ideas as well, and the look of it's important to me. It's not just, you know, these sort of clean concepts presented in a very, you know, concise way. So yeah, I think that's my answer.
Most definitely. That's super interesting. Another question coming in from Tony Smith. Tony's asking, in terms of these works and projects, are these all personal projects you kind of decide to make, or are they commission pieces?
Okay, yeah. So most of those are personal. And that's why I wanted to show you the Rube Goldberg, because that's a commission and quite a, you know, nice sizable one. So I wanted to show you how it would look with me working in a, you know, in a more commercial environment to a deadline and what have you, with some, you know, commercial restraints. The two editions that I showed, they're kind of in between, in that they started life as a, you know, a pure, for its own sake, art piece, and then we found a way to make them into a commercial proposition. So you know, over time, I've certainly done commissions, and I've certainly done commissions that were less sort of, you know, related to what I've shown you today, using those skills, but a bit more. And now I'm basically selling some more things as artwork, so that becomes a more viable route as well. But commissions are good too, because it gets you to think about things you weren't going to think about by yourself, which is quite refreshing.
Amazing. And I think that leads on quite nicely to the next question from Irene, in terms of like getting out there, starting off and making a name. So how did you start? Irene saying, I guess it has to be hard to make yourself a name in the art world.
Yes. There's a whole bunch of suppositions in the art world and things. I started, as I said at the start, I studied graphic design, and that suited me. I don't think I don't think I could have coped with doing a fine art degree. I'd have been all over the shop. I needed some structure at the time. But it was quite an ideasy course, and that suited me, and actually I think served me quite well in terms of getting an idea, and it's a bit vague, and you work until it's concise and has a point, and is less woolly, what have you. So it's been quite a sort of steady sort of fading process from graphic design, and then I did kind of illustration, 3D things. That was the other thing. I was really keen to make things in 3D. So that was a kind of constant, but it's been a sort of a transition from design to more art. And I mean, it is quite tricky with the art world. Galleries can be quite snooty about things. The smarter they are, the less, but I found quite a little bit of a way in with some galleries that are more involved in like sort of street art type stuff. And to me, that didn't make loads of sense, but hey, if it was a way in, that's fine. And actually, in the last few years, Instagram's been great because it's so democratic, and then you end up finding the people who are interested can come to you. So it is quite. I mean, there's a bit of a debate going on about quite what's going on with it at the moment with artists, but it has been historically good. And it has been a really useful tool for me. I get inquiries from all over the world, basically. So it is like an amazing marketing tool, or it has been for me. So yeah.
Amazing. And more of a comment than a question. Obviously the drawing process and the kind of drawing snapshots, and I guess you use a lot of sketching, drawing in terms of your thinking and ideation process as well. So on that note, in terms of the power of drawing, how is that embedded within your kind of testing, prototyping, making, and kind of validation process?
Yeah, I mean that's why I wanted to show you the two styles. So there's the early ones, the small ones where it is an idea and existing. I haven't got involved in the nuts and bolts, and that's the kind of goal. I mean, it's the aim of a piece. And then I do those bigger books where it is much working it all out. And they're definitely not great works of art. It's about me. I'm just thinking on the page. I've maybe held some things up, but it's like, okay, now I need to think spatially, and to think sequentially. If it's as you say, that band is going to go onto that bit, and we've got to connect that bit to there, and etc. As I say, the outcomes from those drawings, I mean, they're not scrappy, but they're not, as I say, they're definitely not works of art, because it's about thinking. And that includes words of lists of at a certain point when I'm making something, there's less to do, so I can make a list. I'll know that I've got these 6 steps left to do. But it's all about, it's thinking on the page, and it's very much for me rather than anyone else. I mean, I perhaps take bit of pride in it, just because I've got to look at this stuff. So yeah, and it's all very much, you know, drawing with a pen on paper. Yeah, I've got nothing against iPads and what have you, but it's the immediacy of pen and ink is, I'm happy with that.
Amazing, amazing. And a final question, I guess, and it connects really nicely with that one is, do you do calculations for your projects? So Irene's asking, like, in terms of mathematical calculations, or is everything about trial and error?
That's a really good question, and you know, well done for, you know, from the engineering department. Good one. And the short answer is sort of not really. It probably. I mean, I do, you know, I am aware, I am trying to save myself time, because you don't want to be doing so much trial and error that you're just going down a cul-de-sac and, you know, although there is a part of me that says, you know, even these cul-de-sacs, nothing's ever wasted, you know, you do learn stuff going down it. But I am trying to be efficient and have a plan. But like sometimes with the gears like that, the last one we saw, the great big, the shoe cycle, I didn't really work out the gear ratios. I knew what the ratios were, but as for working out how much power I'd be putting in to and how that would operate as the outputs on the end, I didn't really know how to do it, is the short answer. Yeah, so it's maybe a bit more intuitive, and yeah, and I mean, it worked out. I think it worked out okay. I mean, there's another one similar with a bike that turns on its own, and it's quite a low ratio, so maybe I've erred on the low side to keep it safe. But and there probably is a proper engineering way of working that out, but I don't know it. And as you say, there seems to be quite a lot, you know, to be able to work out the sort of forces that a human can do with their pedals versus, you know, these sort of cartwheels. But they're not cartwheels anymore, they're covered in shoes. So it just seemed all a bit strange to do a proper job on. So I gave it a whirl and it worked.
Amazing. And a final request for yourself, Nick, is do you have any final advices that you could share with the students?
Good one. I think that's good that we've talked about drawing. It's super useful in terms of, you know, your sort of personal language and articulating what's in your head. And obviously you do that to show other people, but it's also a lot of it is for you. And I mean, I do, as you've seen, I like ideas, and they're also a great sort of currency, a cross-disciplinary currency. You know, you have ideas in sport, in film, in cooking. So I think I find that quite a useful way of looking at the world, and about making things in response to it. So I guess I'm sort of saying drawing and thinking are great tools.
Amazing. That's superb, Nick. And there's a few thanks in the chat coming through for you as well, and you know, comments in terms of thanks for the talk and your work is super interesting. So I think that's a great opportunity now with no further questions to conclude by saying, obviously, Nick, thanks for taking out your time and joining us tonight. It was a fascinating talk and a Q&A session as well. So from all of us at Middlesex University, the product design and design engineering, we thank you for both your time and the talk as well.
Well, my pleasure. It was good fun to do.
Amazing. And for all of the students, participants, obviously Nick's details were sent to your emails ahead of the talk, including links to Nick's LinkedIn, social media handles, and website. So obviously definitely feel free to browse and connect. And to conclude, for all of those who join us tonight, students, staff, alumni, tonight it was our final guest lecture of the 2022 calendar year. The 2022-2023 guest lecture series will resume in week 14 in the new year as well. So keep an eye out on your emails for the details of the talk and the next speaker. And we look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Stay well, stay safe, and wish you guys a lovely break.
Cheers.